Well, I'm live and on a little bit early because um, I just got tired of waiting for it. But I have decided that I'm going to try and take some of my stories and put them into a form that is recorded. And I might write them too. But I realize that I haven't really done that. They've been parts of other shows, and they really need to have their own space, so to speak. So we'll see how this goes. If I do a good job with this one, this may be the one. But I'm going to tell you about my time walking through a park in the Cuyahoga Valley where I live. And it was just a trail that I'd walked, but never that deep. I had never gone that deep into the woods. I never followed it that far. I was in a mood that day and I needed to walk. And I was walking and walking and walking. And I had read in my cards. I'd had a card. I remember I had a card reading that day that I did for myself about watch what you see in the woods today. You may find something unusual. But I kept walking because so far I had seen some very beautiful things because it's the woods and, beautiful Cuyahoga Valley. But nothing that special. So I thought. But I did see some interesting things that made me wonder. I remember seeing these things and saying, wonder how that happened. Things like 2 saplings uprooted with their root balls in the air, their branches on the ground, and rocks on the branches to hold them up in an X formation. And I remember thinking to myself, how? How? Just how? They were kind of big. And I thought, that must have been some storm, right? Must have been a twister. Because that's what you think. You think, must have been a storm. What else would it be? They're pretty big. They're uprooted. Wasn't a person. Or if it was a person, it would have to have some kind of heavy equipment to do that. I mean, they weren't a tiny sapling, they were bigger ones. Actually, somewhere between a sapling and a fully grown. And I'm looking at them just, okay, but walking along. And then I see another thing that kind of piqued my interest, and I wondered who built it. And it looked like a little stack of wood, stacked very artistically in a circle, so that the tips came to a point and the rest of it fanned out and made a kind of a little teepee or a yurt. And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. I wonder who did that. And I'm still not catching on. I'm still not catching on. So then I keep walking down the path. And I see a few little things like that. And I keep thinking, it's odd because those sticks were not just sticks. I mean, they're pretty big. I mean, yeah, how did somebody just break them like that? Because they were broken, like twigs. How does that happen? Well, somebody must have done it. So I'm in my mind, there's this running conversation. And I'm thinking, gee, I wonder what's so unusual out here. Well, I guess that's it. To me, that wasn't for some reason that unusual because I'd seen them before. I'd seen stuff like that before. And I don't know why. I didn't think of it as being unusual ever. Well, maybe because as a kid, as a kid, I played in the woods all the time. As a kid, well, not all the time. Actually, after I got past a certain age, my parents wouldn't let me play in the woods for the earlier part because there's a lot can happen in the woods, and they sure knew that. But once I got old enough, and my friends were there, here, let me prop this so that the left arm is still bothering me. Okay, so I'm still walking down this path, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's cool, but it just didn't seem that unusual. So after I got older and I started going with my friends to the park, I was older and we were in a group, and so I guess they weren't as worried about it. My parents weren't as worried about it, and we were allowed to play there then. And of course, outside is a really big toy and great. I mean, hey, Gemini. And I'm sort of, you know, astounded now that I never thought there was anything odd about it. These structures, I just thought somebody made them. As a kid, you don't question these things too much. So I'm walking along, but see, I'm very spiritual at this point. This was after my near death experience, and I had gotten very spiritual and very interested in things. And I knew that nature spirits were very real, and you did not want to piss them off. And you stayed out of their territory, and you know, you just didn't want to piss them off. It wasn't good. And that was pretty much what I knew, and a little more than that, but it's like basically that's what was in my mind was nature spirits. And I guess that may be true in a way. Who knows? Perhaps that is also accurate. And so I'm walking, seeing all these things. It's a dirt path. And the trees kind of cleared out a bit. They weren't very close. It had come into sort of a more cleared area. So that's why this was so weird when it happened. I'm used to things being, squirrels and stuff. At least this is what my mother always explained it as. You'd get something, like that looked like, hey, a stone or something falling in your path. You hear something fall and click at your feet. We had acorns and all kinds of other things. We had squirrels. Squirrels will drop things on you, sometimes. It wasn't that unusual, but this was odd because it was like a shower of pebbles. And I was thinking, well, that's odd, but, not too weird, I guess, because there were trees around, but not enough to just drop like, they weren't that close. I was thinking, where did that come from? And I looked around and I didn't see anything. Couldn't figure out where they were coming from. And I walked a little farther and more pebbles in the path. That time I actually saw that they were, in fact, pebbles, not acorns or anything. And there was a bunch of them. And I thought, wait a minute, that's like a big handful of pebbles. I look around again. I don't see anybody. Because I'm thinking about that has to be somebody doing it, right? Somebody's messing with me. But that second time, I'm thinking, it was in my mind, what if I am in somebody's front yard? Or I'm in somebody's territory. And me, I'm thinking nature spirit of some kind. And so I finally said out loud, okay, and I stopped and I said, am I in somebody's territory? Am I trespassing? Am I in somebody's front yard? Is that what I'm getting? Is that what's happening? And from way, way up in front of me, way down the path, where it gets way more thick, woods, I hear this yowl that's somewhere between a scream and a growl, more of a scream. And I'm like, and it's this blood curdling sound, really. And I'm just like, oh, I think I am trespassing somehow. Yikes. Really, if it had been too close to me, I would have jumped right out of my skin. I would never have been able to, I'd just, wah, but it fortunately was way up there in the trees somewhere. I'm like, okay. So knowing how some predators are, I mean, we do have mountain lions and stuff sometimes, once in a while. Mountain lion, a bear, a coyote, whatever. I mean, we have, all the regular wildlife from time to time. Have never seen a bear myself around here. But I hear that occasionally we'll get something like that, some of the bigger animals. And you never know because we're invading their habitats all the time. You never know what you might encounter, right? So I'm there like, okay, well, whatever this is, it sounds big. And if it's hungry, I really don't want to be around it. And so I backed up a little while and then I finally turned around and did not run because running will stimulate the chasing urge. You don't want to do that, especially you got to be careful turning your back to ambush predators. That's another thing. And you got to be careful running because some things are just triggered by running. So I just backed up a little bit, didn't see anything coming, turned my back, pricked my ears up so that I could hear anything that was happening, and speed walked. Didn't run, but speed walked. Back along the way I came, I said, no problem. I can go another way. I'm just out for a walk. I don't have to go down this way. Really sorry if I disturbed anybody. This is what was going on in my mind. And I get back up to the main part of the park where I feel, okay, I'm feeling better now. I'm not so far in. And I start, thinking about it. I'm thinking, wow, that was weird. But really, getting back to my car, just getting back to normal life, it didn't stick with me very long. I mean, it's one of those things that had happened and there was no explanation and nothing attached to it. And so it just kind of got put on the back burner of things that happened to me. Oops. Um, oh, hi. Um, so basically, for years, I had things like that happen to me in the woods, all kinds of things like that. At other times that were not quite like that, not quite that dramatic. When I had pebbles in my path, and I'm like, gee, I wonder what that is. Which might have been something, but it took what, 50 years? Because this was back when I was a kid, and I'm in my 60s now. But it's just a number because, as you can see, I don't look it. Uh, I don't act it either. More like 5. No, I'm kidding. I am young at heart, I guess. So after 50 years, now, mind you, I was never into the Bigfoot thing. Never was. It was okay, and even though I was into all kinds of paranormal stuff, it just didn't strike me as being very important for my life. I had never seen one, and I didn't know anybody who ever admitted to seeing one. And, so therefore, it just wasn't important in my life. And so I just kind of, hey, freedom grower, how you doing? So I just kind of filed it on the back burner and said, it's another one of those weird experiences you had. Now, one of the other experiences I had, and I'll explain how this all fits together, how I found out this was actually Sasquatch. There's another experience that I used to have, and actually, this was down in a different area. This was down in the Chuckery area of the Ohio Valley Parks, the Cuyahoga Valley Parks. Um, or was it the Oxbow? I think it was the Chuckery area, down by Rogues Hollow. And boy, a lot of weird things happen down, and I have heard a lot of stories from Rogues Hollow. So called because there was like a penitentiary there or something. And actually, there still is a correction facility. Anyway, there's a correction facility down there, and for some reason, out in the wilds, right? So as wild as it gets around here, there's a road by it, but through it, but there's also a lot of thick underbrush and stuff. We have thick woods, some really thick woods around here, and so we'd go down there to have ceremonies, and the park rangers didn't bother us because they knew who we were. And I was with the Metaphysical Society, and they knew each other. A lot of us knew each other, and they knew we weren't doing any harm. We weren't going to set anything on fire or each other. We weren't smoking dope. We weren't, we weren't doing drug deals. Or anything like that, right? Okay, they all they knew us, that what we would be burning in the bowl was sage. Right. So, hi, Brandy, how you doing? Yeah. So we would many times go down there, and we had this place that we called the Sacred Soccer Field because it was marked off as a soccer field. But if you were sensitive to energies, you would soon be able to tell that there was a circle of energy somehow, almost exactly where they had marked out the soccer field circle. And it was nearby where the signal tree was. And the signal tree was one of the oldest oak trees in the area, actually the oldest oak tree, biggest oak tree in the area. And unfortunately, now it's had a lot of damage, and it's certainly nothing like its former glory. But that's one of the things. I used to go there all the time. We used to go there all the time. I love that tree. I was a tree hugger, and I used to go in and cross over the little fence they had around it, which was like a corral. We all used to laugh. They had to put a corral around it to keep this big tree in. It was really to keep people out, but we couldn't resist going in and giving it a hug, right? It just was a very, very old, wise tree. And you'd come to all kinds of realizations if you hung around with it. It was really, really an interesting time of my life. It was when I was waking up. I had had an awakening, and it was some of those experiences that you have at first that are just so amazing because they're your first experiences, some of your first experiences. So we would sit down at the sacred soccer field, and as it would get dark, the mist would come in because it's a kind of watery area. We're in a wetlands here in Ohio. Most of Ohio is wetlands. A lot of it is wetlands. You're either by a river or a lake or something everywhere, or a bog or something. And we'd sit there and watch the mist breathe, watch the park breathe, and it'd roll in and it'd kind of back up a little, and it'd roll in and it'd kind of back up a little. There was a rhythm to it, almost like watching the ocean back and forth, only a little slower, right? And I know on a full moon, the moon would just get so magnified down there. It was a beautiful area because it was a clearing, and actually I found out later that it was the big tree that had made the clearing. But that's for another story if you know anything about big oak trees. They will make a clearing around them by soaking up all the food and water from the other trees if they're big enough. The smaller trees will be backed up from them because they're sucking up all the nutrients for themselves because they got these huge, deep roots, right? So it tends to make a great big ring around them, a clearing. And This particular tree had been used by Native Americans as a marker tree between two rivers. And so it was kind of a sacred place, and we could feel and we could see that there had been many ceremonies done in this area. And we would sit there sometimes, and sometimes you get a sudden scent of flowers, a sudden floral scent. Now, I was told that that can sometimes happen when there's a fairy around you, but I found out different later. There are other things that can do that too. And occasionally, and more times when it would get kind of late, it would get to a certain hour, and although we know, yeah, they, there was the river nearby, and all kinds of things come down on that river, but we would also smell this garbage smell, and it would pass by. And we didn't think too much of it because the river could be anything could be coming down the river. You never quite know. Middle of the night. It wasn't really quite the middle of the night, but sometimes we'd stay there until like 11 o'clock, which was quite late because parks really closed at dusk. And when we saw those lights coming down the trail towards us, we knew that that was the park rangers coming to close the place up and check to make sure everybody was gone. And we would get our gear together and get in the car and head out. And so there would be a certain hour though, and you know there would also be a certain hour after dark when you'd hear a kill. Something be would make a death scream. And we had our pet bats that would fly around that we'd say hi to. Hi, you guys. um It was a very magical area, and there were deer down there. You had to drive very, very slow down the pathway out because, the driveway out, because deer could just walk right in front of you, and they weren't very afraid of you either. And other wildlife. I mean, you certainly didn't want to mow down the wildlife. So, that was the way we rolled for quite a long time, is we'd go down there and have our ceremonies and do our stuff and then come back up the path and on beautiful full moon nights. Well, so I had stuff like that happen all the time. Or you'd be sitting in the woods and you'd hear wood knocks and you'd be thinking, is that a woodpecker? That's not a woodpecker. That doesn't sound quite like a woodpecker. What is that? But you just think, well, it's amazing how much we write off because we have no explanation. So we just kind of write it off and forget it and file it away for later, right? This happens more than people even want to think about. Probably happens all the time. Anomalous things happen, but we don't have anything to hook it to relate it to. And so it just gets filed on the back burner and we just don't think about it. So here I am. Yeah, hi, Lewis. So here I am. Oh, yes, the Cuyahoga Valley is gorgeous. It really is. I mean, there's so much beauty to see there that I used to hike through. I used to hike through all of these places. Also, the mounds. We have a mound here that most people don't know about. They live practically on top of it. But if you ask people for directions to the mound, we got lost one time. And because I hadn't been there in a few years, and I was asking the direction to Towner's Woods in the mound. And it's marked, although it is marked that there is a mound there. Almost nobody even remembers that there's a park there. that lives around there. We asked people about it and nobody knew what we were talking about. It was so weird because, that's another place that people would gather and do ceremonies. And in fact, that's where the giant bones were laid to rest because the scientists had taken some giant bones out of the mounds there. They didn't tell people they were giants. This is kind of on the down low. The Native American population found out and insisted that they put the bones back. And because there had been so many things, tell you the truth, there had been a lot of weird, anomalous things happening in the area. Just down the road was a spiritualist camp. That's another thing. Down the road from the old spiritualist camp that used to be, that not a spiritualist camp anymore, but was spiritualist community, is a mound, and this woods and all of this. So this is Ohio. We have all this here. We have all this stuff and farms. Lots of farmland. You find dogmen around the mounds and around the cornfields. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know any of that at the time. I didn't know anything about any of that. I was just, this nature child learning the shamanic path. And after my near-death experience, seeing everything with completely different eyes, but still not knowing very much yet, and so here, always kind of stuck with me. What were all these odd things that I saw? I'm trying to think some more of them that happened. But anyway, that gives you some idea of a smattering of things. But so later on, and I swear, if I hadn't heard the stories, this is why I think it's so important and so powerful that we tell our stories. We really need to tell our stories. No joke. Because it's how other people figure out what happened to them. And I'll tell you one about also Dogman after this. Or maybe I'll save it for another stream. But it was a similar kind of thing that happened. I wouldn't have known until 50 years later. I hear a broadcast, and I believe it was Duke's broadcast. World Bigfoot Radio. I'll give Duke a shout out. And I'm listening to this broadcast, and I'm thinking, oh, okay. Well, he's a nice guy. Let's see what he has to say about this Bigfoot. Everybody seems to be interested in. I may have one out here. Oh, yes, I forgot to mention the nearest one. The latest one, the last one that I had. People were talking about Bigfoot. Yeah, no, I should save that for later. Okay, we will. What I'll say is, I'm listening to this broadcast, and I'm hearing people talk about these structures, and I'm hearing people talk about how they'll throw pebbles in your path to warn you off. If you don't pay attention to pebbles, the rocks will get bigger. And I heard people talk about the mind speak. And I heard, see, I always thought when I was out in the woods, I would kind of be I thought I was maybe talking to a tree. I didn't know what was going in my mind. I would hear, it was almost like I would ask questions, I'd hear answers in my mind. And of course, me not knowing any better, I thought, well, maybe the tree's answering me, maybe some nature spirit's answering me. Well, yeah, probably. a nature spirit with about 15 foot, 8 to 15 feet tall, right? But yeah, honestly, I'm listening to these stories and I'm listening to how if they like you, they can smell very good. They can smell the smell like flowers. If they don't want you being there, they can project a smell like garbage. And people were teasing about garbage squatch. I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Whoa. I'm thinking of all those times I spent in the woods. Like I said, since I was pretty young, old enough to be able to go out by myself. And I'm like, and then I heard the Bigfoot yowl. I'm like, oh my God, I will never forget that yowl. That's what that was. And all of a sudden, bing, 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 bing. Oh my gosh. And I see pictures of the structures. I always wondered about, and I'm thinking, I always wondered about that. Who did that? Why? Never occurred to me. Sasquatch. Never occurred to me. Never. Not once did I think Sasquatch. Somebody speaking in my mind, giving me answers to certain things. Never thought of Sasquatch. Obviously, they don't think of themselves as Sasquatch, I guess, or something. But it was so like, oh my God. And then it was like as I was sitting here, this was after I got here in this new place, near the woods again, near the bog. Because it was a strange thing. People would ask questions, be asking questions about the Sasquatch. And I was getting answers in my head. Like, why are they so interested in children? Because somebody was saying, I don't know if I like that they're interested in children. Well, their interest in children is very simple. They love their children. They really do. Okay? They love their children like we love our children. And oh, they also love human children. I mean, they just love children. They're they're very kind to children. They try to be. At least the ones around here seem to. They were kind to me anyway. You know, they never hurt me, scared me. So they like children, and children don't carry guns. Don't generally carry weapons, and children usually accept them much easier. I mean, when they finally do show themselves to a child, if they do, children just kind of accept it. It's just another creature in the woods, right? They don't know any better. So, really, they have a much easier time with children than adults. And that was the explanation I got. And I said, well, you know, that makes a lot of sense, really. Um, Probably, I'm thinking, now, this is another thing that came to me. A lot of these people that have experiences, like there was, I forget which one, was talking about one, a Bigfoot that was kind of treating her like a pet almost. It would get upset, want her to come out of her house, would bang on the walls to get her to come out of her house and see them. And she had red hair. And she said she remembered how one time she woke up, her window was open, there were leaves and stuff all over the place, and her hair was kind of rumpled, like somebody had been, and there were leaves and stuff in her hair, like somebody had been petting her hair, right? She was a redhead. And what I got, see, I was too. I am too. When I get out in the sun, my hair turns red, natural color. turns red. It looks very red. Red is the color of their children. So to them, that's a cute feature. If you have red hair, that's really cute, like a kid, right? I'm like, oh, really? Wow. So they kind of prefer redheads in a way. It reminds them of their kids. I'm like, wow, am I just making this up in my head? And there were other things too. There are other things like that I can't think of right this moment, and I'll tell you later if I think of them. But and all of this stuff I was learning, I'm like going, well, that makes so much sense now. And then the stuff I was hearing in my head was like, wait a minute, do these guys really mind speak? If that's real, and people insist that it is, then am I actually getting these answers from a Sasquatch? And, my mind wanted to go right to, hey, hello there. Yeah, you probably are. But you never trust yourself in circumstances like this, right? Oh my God. So I said, well, okay, if I am mine, maybe they'll. What I was hearing, what I was hearing in my head was, we've known you for a long time. And I said, well, I never saw you. Well, we didn't want to scare you. And I said, so I got this strong feeling that they were even kind of protective of me. There were so many times when the forest just went totally silent. That'll happen when they're around. And they said, well, you never did us any harm. You were always very respectful. This was going on in my head. And I'm like, okay, well, if we're really talking here, can you leave me some kind of sign? There's a path near here. I was hearing how this is perfect terrain for them. Perfect terrain. We got a bog over there, hard for humans to walk around in. So, great for them, though. We got areas where trees are strewn around like pixie sticks. That seems to be one of their like fences. Humans have trouble navigating that kind of terrain. We have deep ravines where they can get down on all fours and run through there. We have rivers and streams. So they have water. We have all kinds of deer and stuff running around, lots of live, uh, lots of food. Let's put it that way. There would be tons of food in their woods, right? And I'm like, wow, this is probably Sasquatch playground here because we've got everything they need to be comfortable, including a way to stay the heck away from humans. And no humans are going to go too deep in the bog. You might never come back, right? Not without a lot of trouble. So I'm like, wow, wonder what I would find. And yeah, oh yeah, Louis, Bombay cats. We'll have to talk about that. I love Bombay cats. They're beautiful. Anyway, I go out on the path the next day after saying, can you leave me something to let me know that we're really talking? And the next thing that happens is I go out on our little path that you can walk your dog down. People do it all the time. That connects two different properties. And there's a woods in there. And I look up and there's this big tree and there's this huge branch, forked branch, that is wedged into the tree in a way that made me wonder how the heck it got there. There were no other trees around. How did this branch get wedged sideways in a tree with the trunk kind of pointing down at the path that I was going down? I'm like, well, that's odd. And I took a picture of it. And I hopefully still have those pictures because some of my pictures have disappeared of stuff. This is not uncommon, by the way. I run into multiple people who tell me about how their pictures that they've stored away have disappeared. But and that seems to be a problem. But I'm looking at this, I'm going, wow, that's weird. And it's like where it's pointing, there's this weird puddle that my mind was trying to make sense of. For some reason, I kept staring at this puddle, and because it had rained recently, and I'm trying to figure out why I'm staring at this thing. And it turns out in my mind, I took a picture of it. That didn't come out very well either. I took a picture of it, and later on, it occurred to me why. That could have very well been a footprint because it was right exactly where the stick was pointing. And I'm thinking, wow, boy, am I dense, right? Sometimes, I mean, am I that, you know, brainwashed to not believe this stuff that I can't even see stuff right in front of me? And so I'm just kind of flabbergasted. And on the walk home, I started getting all these memories of all the times that I was telling you about. And as I was sitting here pondering it, I was getting it, just everything was coming back to me. It was kind of all starting to fit into place. And it was like, oh my God, all of these things could have been Sasquatch. They say they've known me since I was a kid. Oh my gosh. It was like, to me, it was like, then and I said, could that be? Could that really be? And I was online and I talked to some people I knew from Paranormal Portal chat room. And we had a chat room in MeWe.com. I believe it was, I forget whose chat room it was right off. But whether it was Bombers or somebody's. Anyway, and I said, well, yeah. They said, well, I was telling them, they said, well, see if you can get them to do anything else. And I said, okay. And I said, well, I could just ask if they give me another sign because I'm remembering the times that the pebbles were strewn in my path, thrown in my path, and the times that I heard the weird tree knocks, and that time when I heard the yowl, and I'm here, you know. And I said, yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna just say right now because I think I might be talking to him right now because everything you're asking me, I got an answer for. So I don't know if it's a true answer. I mean, I don't know if my mind is just making it up or if they're telling me. So I said, well, hey, uh, give me another sign if I'm really talking to you. And just then I heard pebbles against my window, the very window of the very room that I was in, which is not that far from the path. It's just across the parking lot. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh, holy, right? Blankety blank. Was that an answer? Because I was thinking about the pebbles they threw in my bath. Pebbles against my window. The very window of the room I was sitting in. And that creeped me out, though. And I'm there really thinking, do I really want to pursue this? Because there are many people who do. Some people are, have had good experiences, but a lot of these researchers don't live very long. Duke's one of the most long lived ones. A lot of them have a lot of problems if they try to make anything of it. It doesn't seem to be a healthy thing. Pastime to chase squatches. And that, not only that, but, you know, I also was thinking in my mind, and maybe being influenced by them by this too. Is it even a good thing that people would know about them? Would they hunt them? Would they love them to death? Would they, you know, what the ramifications were pretty, all these things were coming into my mind. And I was saying, I don't know if we're ready for that. I really don't know. If it might be safer for both of our species if people don't know yet and kind of come into this gradually. And not only that, but I didn't know. Hello, Eric. I didn't know if I could emotionally handle it. I didn't know if I could spiritually handle it. I didn't know how I would react if I ever saw one. Hopefully, with dignity, hopefully, it wouldn't be brown trouser time. Hopefully, I would be able to talk to them like a rational person. Hopefully, but I wasn't sure. And I wasn't sure I was ready to be a representative for my species with them. And fortunately, I checked with my pendulum and no, that was not what I was being asked to be, thank God. Because I don't know if I really, you know. But I'm like, wow. So I might have been mind speaking Sasquatch all this time, every time I was out in the woods and didn't even know it. My mind was just blown. It's like, how does this happen? Hi, Barry. How does this happen? How do we just write things off and write things off and write things off and ignore things and put things to the side and put them on the back burner? How does this happen? You know why? We're not conditioned to be able to deal with this. Sorry, my phone is kind of sliding down from the perch I have it on here. I have it being braced by my Sharpie markers box. Okay, so that's kind of tilted. Sorry. Okay, so I'm like, my God, this just blew my mind because I'm thinking, how much are we not seeing of the world? And then I was thinking, it's like that test is supposed to be like a test of your ability to pay attention, where they have the people in black shirts and the people in white shirts passing balls, and they tell you, all you have to do is just count the number of times the people in the white shirts pass the ball. And so you watch the whole thing, and while you're doing that, there is a moon dancing person in a bear suit dancing right through the middle of them, and you don't notice it because your attention, see, this is why the magician tricks work. Your attention is on something else. Your mind totally disavows that weird anomaly that just went by there. And most people, they see that and they never see the bear. They never see the moon dancing bear. And I didn't either. And I'm there going, that's it. That's it. That's exactly how our minds are. It's a certain kind of attention. There's a name for it. I forget what it's called, but there's a name for that. Uh, Inability to see outside of what you're paying attention to. You know, um, you can become more of a multitasker, but I guess that takes some ability. And I would expect probably at one time we were much better at it because we had to live outside where things could change very rapidly. We had to pay attention to everything. Probably we could do that a lot better. But in these times that we're in, usually we don't have to use that function quite as much. So probably it's sort of atrophied a bit in most of us to be able to see everything that's in our environment. I mean, you can miss a lot of things, and magicians use this on us all the time. They take advantage of this, okay? Of our lacks. We have weaknesses, okay? We're pretty smart as humans, but we have weaknesses. We're lacking in certain abilities. So I'm I'm thinking that would explain the UFOs and all of these other things that we're not seeing. And very humorously, there was a book called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy written by Douglas Adams. And if you haven't read it, you'd probably love it because it's very funny and maybe too true in some cases. You'll see why if you ever read it, why I say that. But the aliens had a thing on their ship to protect their ship from being seen called an SEP field, which stood for somebody else's problem. Somebody else's problem field. Hands down, I understood that joke. I mean, that's what it is. You just kind of write it off as like, your mind says, well, I can't deal with that. I don't know what box to put this in. I don't know what slot to put it in. It's just too weird. I think I'll just file it away for later until we can, figure, until something else. It's not really relevant right now. It's not affecting my life. So we're going to ignore it right now, right? That's how your mind works. It's not doing anything to you right now. It doesn't seem to be a particular threat. So, you know, it's not a priority. Then I think of how many other things could be happening like that. How many more things are we missing because of that same function or dysfunction? You know? Because here again, there's another story. And once again, I hear somebody telling their story and it brings back memories. I had an episode in another time here in Ohio. I was at somebody's event. They had a little drum circle or something. And I was walking back to my car, the parking lot area, through a cornfield. And, corn is high. It's very tall. You can't see very much in a cornfield if it has grown up to a certain level. But it had rained a little bit and the ground was a little mushy, not terribly. But as I'm walking, I swear I'm hearing somebody matching my footsteps behind me. And I stop and they stop. And I start walking again and they start walking again. And I stop and they stop. And this goes on a few times. And I'm like halfway out of this cornfield. I can kind of see down the row that I'm not that far from being out of it. And I said, if somebody is behind me trying to freak me out, I'm really too tired to play games. I just want to get back to my car. I'm so tired I could just pass out. That's all I want to do is just get back to my car, go home, and lie down. I am so tired. Okay. If you think I'm going to run, I'm not going to run. If you think I'm going to play, I'm not going to play. I didn't know what I was talking to. I didn't even know I was talking like that. I said, if somebody's stalking me, you know, I don't want to have to meet any resistance. If you come at me, I'll take care of it. But I would really rather not do that. So, if you don't mind, can I just get back to my car and crash? Just get back to my car, go home, go to sleep. That's all I want to do. Because I had this weird, creepy feeling on the back, like somebody is watching me. I didn't want to turn around somehow. I had this feeling, don't turn around. Don't turn around. So I walked out and the footsteps stopped. They stopped. I made it back to my car. I made it back to my home. I took a shower. I went to bed. I thought it was really weird. I figured I was going to ask next time I went to that group who was screwing around with me. But of course, I forgot to do that. But then, 50 years later, well, not quite 50 years. That would be more like 20 years. Yeah, 20 years. So 20 years later, what happens? I'm listening to one of these shows and I'm hearing somebody talk about the very same thing, except he did turn around and he saw a huge dog man, which scared the living bejesus out of him. Now, here's another thing I learned is that dogmen seem to gravitate to mounds, burial mounds, which we have plenty of in Ohio. Some that most people, like I said earlier, don't even know they're near. They live near. Some that people don't know about hardly. And we have plenty of cornfields. And it seems like they gravitate to areas like that, rural areas with mounds and cornfields. This guy was basically telling the same story, except he saw the dog man and he ran for his life. Now, the thing is, as big as they are and as fast as they have to be, you never hear about them actually catching and killing anybody, or even almost catching and killing anybody. Like somebody being mauled by one and surviving it or something, right? You don't hear about that. What you do hear about is them playing with you. Here's what I think's going on. They get bored. And they spook you to see if you're going to run because that's fun. Or if you're going to turn around and go, ah, and run, And who are you going to tell, right? Who are you really going to tell? They already know. You can't tell anybody, So, because they have intelligence, they're not just animals. I'm very convinced of this. I've also run into somebody who alerted me to another fact. Native American dude called them the dog soldiers, the dog guardians. Anubis is the guardian of the dead, Mounds are where the giants' remains are buried. Could it be because they hang around these mounds? Could it be because they guard the dead? They guard the ones in the mounds. guard the mounds. Actually, we've used them to guard our ceremonies when we've done healing ceremonies and stuff. He called them in to guard the ceremony. And I was surprised. And then, before very long, guess what? We had astrally and etherically Anubis show up in our circle. That's a whole nother story. Anyway, my battery's about to die. I'm down to almost no percent. I love you guys. That's my story. I'll come up with more later. I really appreciate you listening to me. I'm down to 5% battery. I think we're going to see a lot more. Refer to the video just prior to this one as to what's going on next year and what's coming up. I think you'll find it interesting. And stay tuned, because I'm going to be doing a lot more of these shorter broadcasts as they come to me. I'm going to be telling my stories of stuff that actually happened to me. And because I want it to be, I want some record of it. And I want some record of my predictions, because I've been right about almost everything for the last 50 years almost. I've been right about almost everything that I've said is a definite prediction. And there are people that I knew in college that see me again. They said, "How did you know that?" It's like, I don't know how I knew that. They'll remind me of things I forgot that I said. But people thought I was weird. Well, I am weird. Okay, I'll accept that. I'm weird. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. I fly that freak flag proudly. And you should too. Hey, I gotta tell you, truth is where you find it. You are divine. And this is Ocean Making Waves. Truth is where you find it. I hope you're finding some on my channel. Making waves is frequency. And the divinity part